I've got one flame to burn, one race that I can say I ran.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 21047.com podcast. My name is Keith Cartwright. I'm the host of this show, and I'm glad to have you listening in today, wherever you are, whenever it is that you might be listening. This is my one flame to burn. This is my attempt to run to dark with the light that I have found in my running journey and in the stories of some friends that I have met along the way, and in many cases, friends that I've had the chance to run with along the way. One of those friends, I want to give special thanks out to my longtime friend and supporter, Robin Larkin. Robin supports me through my Patreon site, which is a platform where listeners, friends, supporters can partner with me financially, and it just helps support what I do here and helps me live out this dream of growing it and reaching as many people possible. So Robin is one of the sponsors of everything that I'm trying to do through 21047. As much as I consider everybody who listens in, who shares in this journey to be a partner, I'm really grateful for these folks who partner with me in a financial way like Robin. Just this weekend, I've released a video to my Patreon supporters that talks about this idea of stepping outside of our comfort zone to truly discover, what we were made to do. So Patreon supporters, there are some extra little perks along the way, just as my way of thanking you for your partnership. Robin, thank you very much. So today's episode is my interview with my dear friend Kel Kelly. I met Kel as part of the Meg's Miles supporters running Facebook group. And Kel, back in 2014 at the Boston Marathon, where Meg Menzies was going to run, had she not been hit and killed by a drunk driver. Kel was really moved by the story of Meg, and so Kel lived and had property near the starting line of the Boston Marathon. So Kel built a replica of the memorial that is here in Hanover County there on the actual Boston Marathon course. So I've got a chance today in this interview to talk to Kel a little bit about that, the story behind that. But Kel is also just an example of, what this 21047.com ministry, as I call it, is all about. I think we all have this flame to burn. With me, I just try to boil it down to just this one flame I have left to burn. We do so much in life, and you just try to figure out what is my strongest way to run to dark with light. Kel, in the last couple of years, has got very passionate, extremely actively involved in the overseas refugee crisis. And it's not just overseas, it's here and it's there. But Kel has made a few trips now to refugee camps. And you talk about run to dark with light. I mean, it's one thing to support different causes from afar, and it's not to minimize any of the help we give. But what a brave step it is to take, what a courageous step, and, talk about stepping outside of your comfort zone into something unknown. You don't know what you're kind of stepping into, but completely driven by this idea of where I'm stepping are people who need me. You step solely on this belief that I have the light that can, sort of uniquely add something to this dark place that they're living in. As much this episode isn't completely about running, although we certainly are going to talk about the Boston Marathon, some interesting perspective from Kel, who lives in the Boston area around the marathon bombings. But this won't be an episode that talks entirely about running, but it is this connection between running, it is this strength that we get from running and physical exercise, and how does that drive us to do the sort of things that we do? How does it drive us to take this light that we have and run it into darkness? And how does it shape our idea of how we help other people be strong? And so Kel's going to talk a lot about that today, specifically as it applies to the plight of our refugees. So, just listening to Kel here today, I hope you are touched by her story and her heart for others as much as I have been since I've known her. And man, it's specifically in this conversation that you're about to listen to. I was really moved and reflected on it for a long time after she and I hung up the other day. Kel sent me a message after we talked and said, boy, I could have carried that conversation on for a long time, and I can't echo that sentiment any stronger because it was powerful. And you just, when you're in the midst of a conversation like that, you just feel that the other person's energy on the other end. You are completely moved by what they're saying and what you know they're doing. And so I'm done. I'm going to quit talking, and I'm going to let you feel the energy of Kel Kelly. So take it away, Kel. Thank you. I want to welcome Kel Kelly, my dear friend, to the 21047.com podcast. So welcome, Kel.
Thank you, Keith. I appreciate being here today.
This is awesome. Kel and I have been a lot of friends. We've been online friends for quite a while, but this is really our first real-life conversation. So it means more to me than just having this podcast opportunity. But I first met Kel back in 2014, and a lot of the listeners here are very familiar with the Meg Menzies story, the Meg Smiles group. And back in 2014 at the Boston Marathon, Kel coordinated and put together a shoe memorial that was basically a replica of the memorial that had been built here in Hanover County. Kel, I've read the story, but I've never had the chance to talk with you about it. So I'm curious how you became aware of the Meg Menzies story up there in Massachusetts. We're in here in tiny Hanover County, Virginia. And then what drove you to take on that memorial project there at the Boston Marathon?
Yeah, I somehow her story came through my news feed on Facebook. And clearly there was some divine intervention, I think, that put it there. I have no idea what the connection actually was to it. But I just could not believe that here was this young mother just doing something as simply as going out for a run in the morning, not even at night when it's dark or whatever, losing her life while she's just out for a run. And the thing that really, I think, touched my heart and almost made it just too painful to even think about as a mother was I sort of Googled, put her name into Facebook and clicked on her name when it came up in a search. And the photo that came up was of her 3 children standing in front of a Christmas tree. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this was a month or 2 ago, and their life was picture perfect, filled with happiness, joy, and love around Christmas. And those children's lives will never be the same. And I just can't imagine what her husband went through, her family went through, and what those children went through. And it just felt like I'm in this unusual situation in that I owned, at the time, a home in Hopkinton, Massachusetts, which is the start of the Boston Marathon, and happened to own a place in Boston, which is the finish. So it just felt like there must be something that could be done to ensure that Meg had a presence at that marathon, given she really gave the ultimate sacrifice of her life, And that's just sort of how the whole thing emerged. I think the real beauty, quite frankly, is all I did was had an idea that I put on the Meg Smiles group page, and it was everyone else from around the world. I think there were 750 pair of shoes or something that people actually mailed. And I think therein really is the voice of humanity and the kindness that lives in people's hearts, because it takes time to get an old pair of shoes, find a box that they actually fit in, go to the post office, get it weighed, pay for the shipment. That's not as easy as clicking on a link and donating, but people really did rise to that.
Right, and so I'm going to fast forward a little bit because that divine intervention, that connection, it only continued to grow. I've lost track of even the timeline. I think it was about 1.5 years ago now. You went and spent some time, for the first time, in a refugee camp in Greece, and you did a lot of writing around that, and as part of this podcast, when I post it, I'll publish some links to your writing about your experience there. But one of your friends was moved by what you were doing there and just felt compelled to do something to help. And so a shoe drive was started. And so the Meg's Miles group, kind of in line with that connection we had with you back in 2014 and the shoe memorial, the Meg's Miles group sent a call out there. Can we all just pitch in, send some shoes? Let's help get some shoes to these refugees. And just like you said a minute ago, people just responded. It was such a heart tug. And so I want to ask a couple of things about that. I was fortunate to read a lot of your stories you were writing about your experience. And I think, like folks have already heard in you, your heart is giant. I'm curious, what about that refugee crisis tugged on your heart so strong? And I mean that in that my heart is pulled by that crisis. And I think many of us, when we see the pictures on TV, are pulled by that crisis. You were pulled actually physically into a camp in Greece. I'd like for you to just talk to me about what pulled you so strongly about that story.
So I ended up on the island of Lesvos in March of 2016. But prior to that, through probably for the 12 months leading up to that, I own a PR agency. I happen to be a news junkie, and I actually don't read books. I unapologetically don't read books. I consume media. So I oftentimes find stories that aren't getting mass market attention or mass media attention. And just had been following the crisis. And, I think the thing that was hardest for me was that and I don't want to talk any politics today because I think it will derail the conversation, but the refugees were, in fact, being politicized by some people in America, and who were clearly confused and didn't know the difference between a refugee who was fleeing from terrorism, due to fear of persecution, and a terrorist who's running around, murdering people. And there is something, and I have no idea why I'm wired the way I'm wired, but I do not do well when people are stripped of their dignity. And the people that were fleeing terrorism, be it in Syria, which gets a lot of media coverage, but refugees are from all over the world. They're from Iran, they're from Afghanistan, they're from Somalia, they're from a lot of different countries. These are people, if you can imagine, in your neighborhood, your neighbors that you have cookouts with, that you plan events with your children around, that you maybe go to the same church to share a religious experience. Just imagine if all of a sudden ISIS or the Taliban or any of a number of different terrorist organizations, or if it's Syria, it could be Bashar al-Assad, right, the guy who's supposed to be heading up your country and taking care of you, really is going in and slaughtering people. These are the people that are running. And it was unconscionable to me that not only were we not helping them, that's one thing, right? But the second thing is they were actually being vilified. And there's something deep inside me when it comes to people's dignities that I just felt like I had to do something. And that's how I ended up over on Lesvos, for pretty much the month of March of 2016, helping them. And for those who aren't familiar with the crisis, at the time what was happening was refugees would flee their countries, make it to Turkey, and it's a short boat ride from Turkey to Lesvos. So it was sort of the shortest crossing, if you will. Lesvos is a Greek island. But what was happening is smugglers are actually selling them their, fake life vests and overcrowded boats. And most refugees can't swim. So the drownings, the people who lost their lives were just insane. But the point is, on Lesvos, we were taking them in. So as they crossed the sea, we were bringing them into Camp Moria. And we were, at that point, just providing basic human needs. Water, shelter, dry clothes, comfort, love, and sort of those types of things.
So I'm curious, Kel, if if me or somebody else, again, and your strength clearly is, it always has been, and just in my interaction with you, you see the good in people. You go out of your way to look for the good in people. I'm curious, you get in this camp actually living day to day with these people, because they are people just like you and me. I'm curious what about their story impacted you in a way that maybe you hadn't anticipated. What about their story, when you're actually living with them, do I need to know, do we need to know, that maybe we don't get, whether we're reading books, whether we're watching the news, whatever account we get that drives the way we feel about these refugees? What would we get if we were actually in there with them like you were?
So it's that everybody has a story, in that, I know I blogged about some of this. So I was helping, and this is a good example. I was helping an elderly couple. I saw an elderly couple trying to navigate this very steep hill down to the registration area. And it was late. I was working the overnight shift. They had come over. They had crossed over from Turkey in the dark. It had been like stormy. And I saw this elderly woman was holding she was holding all of their sort of belongings, which are really just in bags and whatever. And then she was helping navigate her husband, clearly, down the hill. And I couldn't really figure out why she was sort of holding everything. So I ran up, and, there was a language barrier. And at the time, you don't know what it is, whether they speak Farsi or Arabic or whatever. But you'd be stunned at how much you can communicate through your hands, and just through nonverbal gestures. So I said to her, I sort of pointed to her bags and pointed to myself to say, "Can I take your bags?" And as I was taking her bags, she waved her hand in front of her eyes. And I kind of cocked my head like I wasn't sure. And I sort of gave her, through my eye movement, like I don't understand. And she waved it again, her hands in front of her eyes. And I realized what she was telling me was that gentleman was blind. So here is an elderly couple who have made it. I found out they were from Syria. They've made it from Syria to Turkey. They had enough money to pay the smugglers. They crossed the sea in darkness. Neither one of them could swim. They were wearing life vests that if they got wet would have sunk them. And here's this woman and he's blind. I mean, and she's helping him. And culturally speaking, the men in one of the cultures from the countries where a lot of the refugees come from, the men are sort of the strength and the anchor of the family. And there are dozens and dozens and dozens of those. Everybody has a story. Let me tell you one other really quick one. In Lesvos, the bathroom was basically a hole in the wall, and we all used it. And I watched one morning an Afghani man get up, and he picked up his daughter and put her in her wheelchair, and which means she had crossed the sea, and they had managed to bring that wheelchair. The girl was probably about 12 years old. Pushed her down this hill, and I can't emphasize enough, this was a very rudimentary paved hill, so it was very slippery when it was wet. Lifted her out of her wheelchair and went into that bathroom and somehow helped her, relieve herself in there. And it's like there is just story after story after story of what these people have endured. And I look at us, and I'm not passing any judgment on us, but sometimes you look at Americans who get a little pissy when the woman at Dunkin' Donuts got the order wrong or didn't do it fast enough or whatever. And if you look at what these people have endured, it kind of really puts things into perspective. So what I saw in them, which is not generally getting told, is that, the personal struggles and the stripping of the dignity and what these people have been through just to get themselves into a situation where they're in a camp, they're deemed a refugee, and they're out of their country.
Wow. No, my wife, Katie, just recently spent a week over in Haiti. And so before she came home, I warned my 8 and 10-year-old boys. I said, you all might want to just go low on your complaints next week about breakfast not being done, or my video game won't load up quick enough, or the show I want to watch. I just don't think those complaints are going to sit well with her next week. And I think it'll be a good experience for our kids. I think we're committed to getting them on a trip like that one day, earlier than later, just to bring some of the perspective that we don't often get here. We forget some days most of the world isn't living as well as we do. So,
that's a great, if you can do that, if you can get your kids over to Haiti or, any of those places, it will change them in such a positive way at an age where that change can really ignite, some positive action on their part through the rest of their lives. I mean, right. It's really a gift if you can pull that off.
Yeah, because you can tell them, you can teach it as a parent, you can say you have it better than everybody else. But kids are kids, they go by what they see, they go by what they hear all around them until you're in the midst of it. Well, and I don't even think it's just kids. I think too many of us adults who haven't been where you've been in the midst of that. It's easy to know it. It's easy to believe it. It's a very different thing to actually feel it. And I think that's what you do, and you portray that so well. So one of the things you did, Kel, after, again, your heart being moved by this, you've started this organization, Humanity Rises, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But so I've been following your Humanity Rises story, and, correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears the first thing that you all did was install an outdoor gym. I'm just curious because, we think of all the ways we can help, all the things we can do. And you listed some of those things: food, water, shoes. You installed an outdoor gym. I'd love to hear the thinking behind that, the reasoning behind that.
Yeah. When I came back from Lesvos after spending the month there, to be brutally honest, because quite frankly, I don't know how to be anything else. I mean, I was suffering emotionally and really didn't get my arms around understanding why. It was at a level of like a PTSD. I've since read a lot about volunteers who are in the thick of that and then come back. And it was really hard. I mean, I will tell you, I will never be the same, I think in a good way, but was struggling over the fact that I was back. I mean, I have to make a living still, you know what I mean? I'm not retired. And knowing what was going on over there. So what helped to heal me was coming up with this idea of Humanity Rises. And I reached out to a friend of mine. I said, I just registered the domain name humanitymrises.org. I have no idea what we're doing. I know it's going to be focused on just restoring dignity and hope, but I'm going to go over on a trip, which I did in April of this year with my son Sean, to ask the refugees themselves what is most needed for them at the time. Because there's a lot of organizations that are focused on children in preschool, and they're all really great, and food and those types of things. And what I heard most back from people, what I saw was they were sitting around a lot. And you know this as a runner, and I'm sure a lot of the people who listen to this will get this as well. If for whatever reason you're unable to run for a week, mentally you end up being off. You're just not as strong. And for refugees who sit around wallowing in uncertainty, and bigger uncertainty than anything that any of us have had, I started to think about maybe what they needed was something that would give them the physical strength to build the emotional strength, to basically keep hope alive. And ironically, that is what the feedback was that I got from everybody was they wanted a gym. When I was over in December of last year, I had set up a gym just based on some equipment I found that was like in the back of this old warehouse area, and it was really disgusting and dirty. But the reaction, even from Muslim women who traditionally aren't people who go to the gym on a daily basis, was overwhelming. So it was of no surprise to me when I kept hearing gym. But you'll appreciate this. And I know that we share a belief in God and the power of the universe and all of that. We certainly don't share a religion, but so I'm hearing this. They need a gym. The problem is not all refugee camps have a space for a gym. A lot of the camps are 100% outdoors, and that's problematic. Also, you have to staff a gym because you need a trainer. If you just and I watched this actually in December of last year. I watched a couple of Muslim women come in and pick up like 35-pound weights and lift them over their head, and they almost go backwards with them. So, you with kettlebells and weights, you can hurt yourself.
Right.
Lo and behold, my son Sean and I were picking up. There are occasionally very fortunate refugees who volunteers that come through will pay for apartments in some of the cities in Greece for them to live in. So this one particular woman was pregnant, and that often is the scenario. Some volunteer who came through who had the means was paying for her to live in her apartment. So Sean and I were swinging by the apartment off the traditional beaten path to pick her up and bring her to the camp because she was going to spend the day at the camp. And as we went into this neighborhood in Halkida, Greece, which is about an hour north of Athens, my son Sean said, "Look," and I looked over my shoulder, and lo and behold was an outdoor gym park. And I don't for 1 second believe that was random. I believed it in the power of some bigger being, whether you call it a God or the universe or whatever, but we were meant to cross that path. And in the end, so I went, we did the equipment, I reached out to a bunch of outdoor gym park vendors, and lo and behold, that one that was that manufacturer ended up just being the perfect fit for us. And that is sort of how all of that came together. And the fundamental belief is that in order to get the emotional strength that they need to navigate this unimaginable crisis, they need to maintain hope to survive. And the best way to get that emotional strength is through physical exercise. And that's sort of how it all came together.
Wow. That is just so powerful. And it's so fitting with, so I ran my first marathon last year, and, when I got done with it, I just felt like there's something, a part of my story that's really not running that I want to share. I've just learned so many life lessons along the way from this running journey, and they almost all are rooted in strength, and it goes to strength beyond being a better runner. And so, this whole podcast is based on a biblical verse, 2 Timothy 4:7, that says, I've fought the good fight, I've finished the race, I've kept the faith. And so as I really started digging more into Paul, who wrote that scripture, it just amazed me in his teaching how many athletic and many times specifically running metaphors he used to deliver his message. And I think it really is rooted in this idea that, this physical strength is such a foundation for all this other, the hope, our emotional strength. So I'm curious, has there been any feedback so far from the folks who've got to use this first gym?
I mean, the feedback today has just been overwhelmingly positive. They need this. They need it, and they need it in a big way. So yeah, the feedback has been fantastic. People are using it, all demographics of people, from Muslims to Christians, from young to old. I don't know whether you saw, I think I uploaded a video of an older Afghani gentleman who was actually using it. Yes. He was so determined. And children who are over the height of 4 feet can use it as well. So it really, it's been amazing. And my biggest challenge right now is I have funding for 2 more parks, and then we will actually do group fundraising initiatives for future parks. Is the bureaucracy of getting a park in is a far greater hurdle to get over, quite frankly, than fundraising to actually pay for them. So I spend a lot of my time networking with, Greek government officials and volunteers and other people to just try and get things through. So I've got a lot of plates spinning now, and my hope is to get a minimum of 2 more parks in the fall, because awesome. People need them. Yeah.
Well, I'll be sharing, Kel, links to Humanity Rises, to the website, to your Facebook page, and hopefully then folks will be inspired to follow along, and where we can help and respond to requests to help. Hopefully we'll rise up and do that, because you tell a powerful story here. And I love what you say about, and I think we forget that too many times. I am such a lover of stories. And that's part of this podcast too. I just have no problem reaching out to people who have these stories, because I'm so curious to hear them. Not just to hear them, but I know once I know somebody's story, I'm going to be driven to do something different.
Yeah.
Everybody's story moves me some way. So I appreciate you sharing this story with us, and I love your heart for it. I'm curious. So you're a marathoner, right? You've run marathons.
I used to be till I got a new kneecap, but yes, I've done Boston 3 times and a couple of other ones, and I'm thankful that I was able to do that. Unfortunately, I can't run anymore because I tried to after I got my new kneecap, and that didn't go so well, and my surgeon told me he was basically going to kill me. So I'm no longer running, but I am doing other exercise.
I'm glad you're listening to your doctor. But I am curious, because I'm new to this. I mean, I've always been fairly active working out and different things. I was never a runner that ran much more than a mile or so until the whole Meg story touched me in a way that's similar to what you talked about earlier. And so then here I am all of a sudden running half marathons and then a marathon.
Amazing.
But one of the things that has just amazed me, and I don't know, maybe it's just this one running community, but it seems to me there's something about runners in general that pull together and treat each other, act as a community in a way that, I don't know, I wish a lot more communities would. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that or if you have seen the same thing.
Yeah. And this is just my belief for what it's worth. I mean, trained experts would probably tell you that there's nothing true to it, but I think people who run or people who exercise in general, but certainly runners and certainly long-distance runners, in running actually help build that mental strength, but also push up. Like one of the best things for me, if I had something that was causing anxiety in my life, was to go out for a run and I would clear that right out of my head. And I think when we clear our heads, it allows our consciousness level to expand and to rise, and for us to see and feel more at our core soul than we would if there's a lot of noise and chaos in our lives. Because when if you haven't, again, gone out for the run and, you've got some stressful situation in your life, you're not connecting to your soul and to who you are and to others at a level when you're healthy and you're clear. And I think, and I could be completely wrong, but I think that's why runners, because they run regularly, because they have healthy and clear minds, they're able to actually go back to those feelings that we all had when we were born, right? When we were born, we couldn't speak a language, but if someone smiled at us, we smiled back at them. As children on the playground, we knew that it was kind to help someone up if they had fallen. I mean, you literally go back to all those beautiful attributes that every soul is born with. I think a lot of the people, a lot of what I see and hear now is just people who have so much noise in their life that they're just grounded in fear. Fear of different types of people, fear of different religions, fear of people who don't have the same skin color. And that's really, really sad, because once you get down to who we all are, we're just human beings who were born with the same level of kindness and love in our hearts. And I think running allows us to stay connected with that, as does other exercises. It's not just runners, but I do think long-distance runners in particular, because they spend so much time often in a meditative state. It's like the same benefit I think a lot of people get from yoga. And again, that's how I see it. I'm sure some psychologists would come in and tell you. There's no
well, I'm going to tell them that. I'm going to tell them I side with you. So that's because that has absolutely been my experience. I've said that especially for me, I don't have to run too far to make it a long run because I'm pretty slow. But I've said that what I get from it more is that quiet time. And, I do spend a lot of time talking with God. But I have said in running, I have heard God talk back to me more clearer than I have ever heard in my time reading the Bible, than I have ever heard sitting in church listening to pastors, and I get great value out of both. But there's just something being out there and I think what you have said, it takes you to this sort of quiet place, this quiet state. Maybe it does return you to some place where you were better at just being sensitive to what's going on around you. But that has been the most powerful piece to me. And then, but then some of these ideas you come up with, like this whole podcast that I'm sitting here doing right now, came to me when I was out running. But the other thing I think about running is that, it gives you the courage to, when you see something, I think too many people get ideas and then it just, they're out running, they get an idea and then it goes away. Or people just driving down the street and seeing an outdoor gym, right? And thinking, this is a good idea, but then they never do anything about it. And so I think running, just the fact that you're out there pushing yourself beyond something that you really thought you were capable of doing, gives you the courage to pursue some other areas in your life that maybe you didn't have the courage to do before.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have, as you know, I don't have any organized religion in my life, but I have a friend, Nancy, who's my spiritual advisor, and she's really helped me understand a lot around awareness and different levels of consciousness. And I think when you're aware and you're taking in, there are so many signs out there for us that direct us that we're just too darn busy or too much noise in our head or whatever that we miss, that when you do get to those states where your mind's clear and your heart is open, it really does help not only guide you but elevate you from a level of consciousness perspective in a way that, it changes you, and in changing you, it allows you to help change others in a positive way. And it's been one of the most beautiful spiritual journeys for me personally. It's helped ground me in compassion a lot more now than it did when I was arguing with people politically over just crossed beliefs is probably the best way to say it. I understand now more that people aren't necessarily, deplorables, if you will, as much as they're either people whose consciousness level is just in a different space, or there's fear that's actually clouding them. And what I try to do is have more compassion and try to engage them more in conversation to try and, help elevate awareness around things. I think those are the bridges that have to be built. Listen, I'm always going to go to toe-to-toe with people I perceive to be bullies, and that'll never change. It's not how I'm wired. But, I think as a country, we're coming together. I think we are. I think that for as much as we think there's a divide, I disagree with that. I think that we're coming together because you do see Democrats and Republicans coming to a middle ground. There are still people on polar sides of that, but I see more unity than I do division. And in that, for me personally, is hope. Because we all have to come together. Humanity Rises was named that for a reason. Humanity needs to rise to help each other. So whether it's the refugee crisis, whether it's dealing with homelessness, whether it's dealing with other oppressed groups of people, we have to. We have to. That's who we are. That's why we were put on this earth. And whether you believe God put us here or the universe put us here or whatever. We're not here to help ourselves, I don't think. I think we're here to help other people. And we all have a reservoir of kindness that's unlimited if we just tap into it, and it doesn't cost any money. So
no, I agree everything you just said there. And it's funny, I was thinking just this morning that, I know not everybody believes in the Bible the way that I do, but in reading it this morning, one of the passages that was being expanded on was talking about, Jesus as this servant. Jesus went out. He came 100% as a servant. He served others. That's the only goal he ever had. And, this commentator this morning was making the point that he didn't come to do that so he had somebody to say, I want to be like that. He came as a model for what we're supposed to do, which is to serve others. And my thought this morning was, and you've really drove this whole point home to me right now, was even if folks don't believe the way that I do and others do, I think it would be life-changing if everybody would just adopt that model. If everybody would just take on this idea of, I am here 100% to serve others. I think whether they ended up believing in Christ or not, they would find a joy and fulfillment in their lives that would make it worth it anyways. And just
that's
to hear
the
you
key.
say. Yeah.
That's the key to it all, is to allow people the religious freedom, whether they're Christians, whether they're Muslims, whether they're agnostics like me. That doesn't mean I don't believe in God. It just believes I respect all religions. Is to just let them serve, right, in whatever way that they want. It doesn't mean going to church. It doesn't mean whatever. As long as you're helping others, that's how humanity will rise. And in lifting others, we unknowingly, and certainly not through a self-serving way, but we lift ourselves along the way. You know, you used to tease me, and you're not, so you used to tease me and say, if you don't think Jesus is working through you, and what I never told you is, like, I can't, there's been dozens of people that tell me that all the time. My friend Paula, who runs a respite center for intellectually disabled adults and children, she yanks my chain on a regular basis about, if you don't think Jesus is behind everything you're doing, and that's cool. I'm totally down with Jesus being behind it, the universe being behind it, my mom and dad from heaven being behind it. I don't care. I get more joy out of doing this type of work than anything else in my life in 54 years. So I wish I could do it full time someday.
Yeah, well, I have a feeling you will. You're on a mission, and I love everything you're doing. I love you for it, and it's just been beautiful to watch. I've learned so much from you, being a part of your story. Like I said, that just drives home the point when we refuse to dive in the stories of other people because they're different than us. Then boy, we lose out more than anybody else, and I've learned that an awful lot through you and other people. So I thank you for that. I appreciate it.
It's really, it's amazing. Everybody has a story if you just start asking them. One of my favorite things is to a cashier who looks so frazzled, say, how's your day going today? And you'd be stunned at sort of the responses that you actually get, because nobody really oftentimes cares to ask the cashier how their day is going, you know? And in that, I find I would rather any day of the week connect with the janitor, the server, the whomever, than, the billion-dollar CEO and the whatever. I want to hear about real people and their struggles and what fills their heart with joy. I don't want to stand in front of people and listen to how great they are and how much money they have and whatever. I can literally and physically see the energy being sucked out of my soul when I'm around those people. It's awful. Right. Real people are like some of the greatest gifts in life. And the Meg Smiles community, those are real people. They're connecting for real reasons. They're sharing their struggles. They open their heart to Scott and to Pam and to everyone. And it's one of the most beautiful things I've experienced in my life, is being touched by that community.
Well, we are grateful that you're a part of it. We've been grateful to partner with you on beautiful things, and I know we'll continue to be able to do that. One final thing I wanted to ask you about before I let you go was, so you did or you still do live, and your close ties to the Boston Marathon. And I know even this year, when I was sitting in the midst of this whole experience, I thought, oh my God, I really am kind of turning into this runner thing that I never wanted to be. But I was following my buddy Bruce online at the Boston Marathon. And, online it was just watching this dot, move along this screen. And I had goosebumps following this thing and just thinking about it. And it was, I don't know where any of that came from, but I remember reaching out to you afterwards, even saying, Kel, if you know any way or anybody, how's the best way to get in the Boston Marathon? I need to do that thing. And it's the goosebumps have gone away, and sort of some of that immediate aftermath enthusiasm has tapered a little bit. But I'm curious, any advice or any thoughts you have around folks who might be listening to this, because you have run the Boston Marathon, any advice you have for them if that's sort of a dream for them? Yeah.
If you're a runner, and I don't say this, I've run races all over the place, but if you're a runner, you should give yourself the gift of running the Boston Marathon, and you do not have to qualify to run. If you go to the BAA's website, the Boston Athletic Association, there is dozens and dozens of charities that you can fundraise for and get a number. And Boston was always special. It's the route, it's the history, it's the fact that for 26.2 miles there are screaming fans, 20 people deep. There's not any run, any stretch of that. But, after the bombing, it really there was a whole other layer of emotion that came around that. Because in that, we as Bostonians were saying, I ran the year after, it was the last time I ran it. And I think for all the spectators that showed up, this is our city, and evil is not going to take anything from us. And the emotion around the Boston Marathon, the memorials you'll still see along the way to people who lost their lives, whether it was the first responders or the runners or whomever, will take you to an emotional level that I think it's hard to experience with any other race. And I would tell everybody to treat yourself to that. And for you, Keith, my friend, you do that. You stay with me right in the city for free. You won't need any out expense to stay at a hotel, but treat yourself to that. Bring your family up. Have them be at the finish line when you cross. There is nothing like running Boston. Nothing. And I have been going to that marathon since I was born, so 54 years. My grandfather used to walk me over from Mission Hill where he lived. We'd take the trolley and then we'd walk and he'd hold my hand and we'd always go to Heartbreak Hill. And my dad took me there. I mean, there's so much history to it. Every runner on earth should find a way to fundraise to run that race. It's a great gift to yourself as a runner.
Great. Now the chills are back. I got rid of them. You just brought all that excitement all back again.
No, I want you to run it. And you know what? If Pam is listening to this, I want Pam to run it too. I want Pam to know from the inside out what it was that drove Meg to be so interested and committed to that race. And you won't understand it till you actually run it. So I would love for the both of you to come up.
Well,
both of you are welcome to stay with us and to run the race. It would be fantastic.
I'm going to make sure she listens to this episode specifically then, because I think that's probably a little seed that's in the back of her head too. So she needs to get some of the goosebumps around that. Yeah. But Kel, I am beyond grateful that you took the time, that you opened your heart to this conversation. You've always made me want to be a better person. This conversation has done nothing to derail that. So I'm so grateful for you. I thank you.
Listen, I have so much love in my heart for the entire Meg Miles community. The only thing I will say is I wish that there was never a reason for this community to come together. I wish that Pam had her daughter back and her children had their mom back. But in that loss, it ignited what I think is the best of humanity, and for that I'm exceptionally thankful. And I'm sorry I'm getting emotional. It tends to be who I am, but exceptionally thankful to have been on the receiving end of all the love that's been radiated from that community. So I love you all. I am not involved in the group anymore because I don't run, and sometimes it's hard to not be able to run. But I hope that I'll always be an extended member of that family, and certainly
no,
feel
you're
like
a part
you
of
will
it.
for me.
I need to let you know right now, you are a forever part of that group. You've cemented a couple of milestones in that group that really represent all that the group stands for. You know, when we got invited recently to go to the Facebook Summit in Chicago, when I had to define the group in a couple of interviews, a running group wasn't the first thing I said, and most often I said it was just a group of people that came to this online community looking to live life together in a way they wish they could do it in the real world. Hopefully left that online group more motivated and more convinced that they indeed could live this way together in the real world. And I think you're just a shining example of that. The Boston Shoe Memorial, the just small role we got to play in the shoe drive, and that was moved by your heart. And so you're a big part of the group. Don't ever say you're not a part of the group anymore. You are family, my friend.
Well, I appreciate it. I love, love, love you all. Keith, I want to see you up here running Boston someday. I'm going to hold you to that, my friend.
All right. Well, let's write it down today then. I'm on a mission. So, Kel, I love you. I hope you have a great day. Thank you again.
Thank you, my friend. Take care.
Yeah, have
Bye-bye.
a good day. Bye-bye. Wow, so I promised you that was going to be powerful, and I hope you agree with me after listening to Kel. She's a force. She just has this deep love and just this deep compassion. She has this unique ability to put herself in other people's shoes, and I think, that's powerful. I think if we could all just adopt one characteristic, one quality in our life, it would be this drive and, hopefully this ability to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. And I think when we do that and we really begin to kind of understand the trials that other people are going through, I think we transition from being judgmental to compassionate, and then compassion is always the driving force behind the drive to help. That's what Kel does. She helps. So thank you, Kel, for being a part of this show, for giving me the chance to interview you and share your heart with others. It's been a true blessing, and I will certainly ponder this challenge you've offered about running the Boston Marathon. I do know that there's a time limit at Boston, which may be a hurdle for me, but we'll tackle that bridge when we get to it. So again, thank you all for listening in to my interview with Kel. Thank you again to Robin Larkin, the sponsor and supporter of today's podcast episode. If you have any interest in checking out the Patreon partnership, you can go to my website, 2tim47.com, TWOTIM47.com. Click on the Support Me tab, and you can learn about different ways to support me, including the Patreon opportunity. And like I said, I just released a video today for Patreon supporters, and everybody who supports at every level on Patreon is going to have access to these videos, and this very first one that I released and published today. As always, it is great having you along. I appreciate you being a part of this journey. So when you're out there this week, whether you're running, whether you're working, whatever it is you're tackling in life, I hope you'll reflect just a little bit on this conversation that we had the chance to have with Kel today. And, just keep in mind, although Kel packed up and went over and spent time in a refugee camp, there are a lot of folks right in our neighborhood, right in our office space that, they need our compassion and maybe need our help. So look for those opportunities. Let's, just work on, I know I'm going to this week, and driven by this conversation with Kel, to do better at putting myself in other people's shoes and hopefully unleashing a little bit of my own compassion. So again, thank you all. I hope you have a great week. If you're out there running, run hard. If you're just out there spectating, watch them runs hard and cheer hard. And if you have no interest in running at all, you are always welcome here, because I was once there. So thank you. You'll have a great week.
Can't stop now. Look how